Hilchos Beis Habechirah Perek Chamishi, the laws of the chosen house, the holy temple, the Beis HaMikdash, chapter 5. The Rambam is kind of zooming out. In the first few chapters, he discussed the kelim, the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash. Yesterday, we talked about the structure of the actual heichal, the actual building where everything went down. And today, we're going to kind of go even further out, and we're going to discuss everything else. The Har HaBayit, what's called the Temple Mount, and the Azarot, the courtyards, the two courtyards of the Holy Temple.
Is before Horus.
What we're seeing here is after Horus expanded. This whole left area was Herod's expansion. Yeah. The second temple was pretty big already, and Horus added this whole left area. Of course, this is just a model built in Jerusalem. You can see it till today. Very small scale model, but in the picture it looks nice. So, again, the Temple Mount and the courts. So the Rambam begins, Har HaBayis, VHU, Har HaMorya, the Temple Mount, which is Har HaMorya, that's the mountain where Avram Avinu made the Akedah. Haya chamesh meyes amma al chamesh meyes amma. It measured 500 by 500 cubits. V'haya mukaf chayma, and it was surrounded by a wall. All around there was a wall. So right over here, the Rebbe has a whole explanation. Why does the Rambam write all these details? So obviously, the fact that it was 500 by 500 ammas we have to know because the Temple Mount has special laws that only apply in that square. Zeh. Kotel HaMaravi is the back, the western wall. Yes, we're looking frontwards. This is the western wall is the western wall of the Temple Mount in the back. So the fact that it's 500 by 500, you have to know for the special laws that apply in that area. So you have to know that it was that big. The fact that it had a wall obviously is relevant because if the wall gets broken, you have to fix it. But why is it important to know that the Temple Mount is Har HaMorya? The Rambam doesn't just say things randomly. So the Rebbe once explained because the Talmud Yerushalmi asks a question. Talmud Yerushalmi says that the people of old who lived in Israel before the Jewish people were so idolatrous that every single mountain, they put an avodah zarah, they put an idol on every single mountain. So the Yerushalmi asks, Beis HaMikdash heicha nivne? Where was the temple built? Every single mountain was idolatrous. So one answer is that there was a special prophet who told them that this mountain was never used for anything else. But the Rebbe says perhaps the Rambam is hinting the answer with these words. He says, Har HaBayis is Har HaMorya. Har HaMorya means that's the mountain that Avram already used. He made it holy. He sanctified it. Once somebody sanctifies it with an action, nobody can undo that. So kind of by adding those words, the Rambam is hinting to the answer of how the temple was built.
They can desecrate it, but not undo.
They can't undo the holiness. V'kipin al gabi kipin, hayu bnuyos mitachtav. Even though you're looking from the top, you see a full structure. The way it was made under was with arches. I couldn't find the picture that I was looking for, but basically it's something like this. Underground, they made a series of arches. Why arches? Says the Rambam mipnei oyel hatuma, to protect from what's called the tent of impurity. In the Rambam's 10th book, we're learning the laws of corpse impurity. If you're under the same roof as a corpse, you become impure. And if they were to build over the mountain, and the entire mountain could become an oyel, if there was any impure stuff under it, it would make the whole place impure. By making arches, the arches shut out the ritual impurity through the mechanisms which the Rambam will explain in the 10th book.
This illustration is what people, how it was built. That's
Under the foundation.
Yeah. Oh, wow, double arches.
Yeah. Kipin al gabe kipin, arches on top of arches, because the arches on top of arches shut out the impurity based on the mechanisms that the Rambam will explain in that 10th book. V'kulei haya mekura. It's not how people like to imagine it, but the Rambam says the entire area, the open area of the temple plaza on the Temple Mount was roofed. There was a covering. Stav lifnim mistav. One colonnade inside another colonnade. So here they only have roofs on the sides, running along the perimeter. But according to the Rambam, the entire thing was roofed, and Rashi also writes that in the Gemara, that it was to protect people from rain. People came to visit, so in the actual temple structure, there couldn't be roofs. But all around, there was a roof. Halacha Beis, by the way, this is, according to one opinion, this is the current area. If you look today where Israel is, this is their estimation. The green is where the original 500 by 500 ammas of the Har HaBayis was. The red represents parts of the expansion that Hirad did, and this is estimated where the Holy Temple used to be. This is like using today Google Earth and then kind of superimposing the temple on top of it. We don't exactly agree with all this. There's many different opinions exactly about this. I'm just showing you one, how you can literally see how it's superimposed on Jerusalem. It says that Beis there were 5 gates to the Temple Mount. So again, an illustration here, and you can see the 5 circles represent the 5 gates. Echad min hamayrav, there was one on the west, came into the back of the Temple Mount. Ve'echad min hamizrach, one in the east, central, right in the front. Ve'echad min hatzafain, one on the north, it's down here. Ushnayim min hadarim, and there was 2 separate gates from the south. The south side seems to have been the most accessible side, and therefore required 2 gates to accommodate the crowds. Reichav kol shar esr amayis v'gavay esrim. Every gateway of these 5 was 10 amas wide, it's about 15 feet wide, and 20 amas, about 30 feet tall. V'yesh lahem dlasais, and they had doors. These gates had doors. Halacha gimel lifnim mimenu. Inside the Temple Mount was a soireg makif saviv. Soireg means a woven or a lattice work fence surrounding it all around, roughly in the area of this red rectangle. A low fence, gavay asara tfachim, it was just 10 tfachim, 10 handbreadths, 30-40 inches tall. According to some, this served to make the temple into a private domain, so you're allowed to carry in it on Shabbos. Inside this fence was the area called the chel. Now, according to some opinions, and it perhaps is the Rambam's intention in his commentary to the Mishnah, the chel is a wall. But as we're going to explain it here, the chel is this kind of off-white space. Yeah. After the red is the soireg. Inside the red, before you get to the actual walls of the Azara, this area is called the chel. And I'm skipping the word gavhay. If you have the word gavhay, which means height, that's according to the interpretation that chel is a wall. We're going to skip that word. Eser amos. It was 10 amas of space, about 15 feet of space between this fence and the wall of the Azara. Ve'alav hu oimer bakinais vayavel chel. About it, it says in Eicha, in Lamentations that we say on Tisha B'Av, vayavel chel. They mourned the chel. The chel meaning that space between the soireg and the Azara. The chayma, the next word in the verse, and the wall, zu chayma sa Azara. That's a reference to the wall of the Azara itself, the wall of the temple courtyard itself, this wall over here. So we basically have 4 elements. We have the Harabais, that's the Temple Mount, the plaza. The red represents the soireg, the small fence. The inside of that is the chel, and then you have the wall, the actual wall of the Azara. Lifnim min hachel o Azara. Inside the chel was the courtyard. Now, we're going to be focused on what's called the actual Azara, this courtyard. This is a bird's eye view. This whole square, ignore the English words here, this whole square is called the Ezras Nashim, the women's courtyard. We'll get to that later today. First, we're focused on the Azara, because the core part of the temple, as the Rambam said in chapter 1, is actually not this part, not the women's courtyard, the main courtyard here. That was inside the wall of the Azara, was the Azara itself. The Chola Azara, Hoysa Oirech Kuf Pei Zayin, Al Reichav Kuf Lamed Hei. The entire Azara, if we included the entire square, even behind the temple structure, was 187 amas long by 135 amas wide. Veshiva Sha'arim Hayula. And it had 7 gateways, 7 entrances. We'll see more about this in chapter 8. 7 entrances. Shloisha min atzafain hasmuchin lamayrav. 3 on the north, close to the west side, down here. Shloisha min hadarim smuchin lamayrav. 3 on the south side, also close to the west side, over here. The echad b'mizrach mechuvan keneged beis kodesh hakadashim ba'emtza, and 1 in the east, right here, directly aligned with the Holy of Holies. If all the doors were open, technically speaking, you could stand here and see into the Holy of Holies. Halacha hey, kol shar mehen. Every one of these 7 gates, hayarach by eser amas v'gavay esrim amma, was also 10 amas wide, 20 amas tall, v'hayulei dlasis mechupay zav, and had doors that were covered in gold. Chutz mishar mizrachi, except for the eastern gate, this one over here, it was plated with copper. that looked just like gold. That gate was called the upper gate. It's also known as Nicanor's gate. It has a fascinating story attached to it. There was a man named Nicanor who wanted to donate gates to the temple. He commissioned them from Egypt, from Alexandria. They had a special copper that shone like gold, and he brought them over on a boat. He was going to sail them on a boat to Israel, and while he was on the ship, a storm broke out, and they had to throw off all the heavy loads from the ship, and they demanded that he throw off these doors. He said, no way, the doors I made them for the temple. And they forced him to throw off one door, and after he threw off one door, they asked him to throw off a second one. He held on to the second door. He said, if you throw off a second door, you're throwing me off with it. And they didn't throw him off. And they kept going, and as they reached the port of Israel, the door that had been thrown off floated up to the top. Miraculously, it floated with them. A special miracle happened to it, and he brought it to the temple, and because of that, they honored him by putting it literally the most central gate leading to the Azara was Nicanor's gate. Halacha Vav. Ha'azara lo hoisa mechuvenes be'emtza harabayis. This area, again, this whole left square here, called the Azara, was not directly in the middle of the Temple Mount. So if we go back to this picture, this is the Azara, this square. Forget this front square, just the back square. So the back square is obviously not in the middle of the entirety of the Temple Mount square. Rather, it was furthest from the south. It's the south over here. So from the south to the edge of the Azara was the furthest space. And closest to the west, literally right in the back, more than all directions. From it to the north was a little bit more than from it to the west. And from it to the east was more than what was to the north. Because again, we're talking from here, from this line all the way to the east. So you have least space to the west, a little more to the north, even more to the east, and much more all the way to the south. In front of the Azara to the eastern side was the women's court. So now we kind of shaded it out so you can appreciate the difference. This is the Azara, the main part of the temple structure. In front of that, they built what's called the women's court. We'll soon see why it was called the women's court. This was a square, 135 by 135 cubits. There were 4 rooms on the 4 corners, each one 40 cubits. Doesn't say if it was 40 by 40, some say it was 40 by 30. The Rebbe seems to understand it was 40 by 40. They were not roofed, they were open air rooms, and that's how they will be also in the future. In the third temple, there's going to be also 4 rooms. They're also going to be unroofed. What did they serve? So the Rambam begins with Droimis Mizrachis, the southeastern gate, this one over here. Oh, by the way, here you could kind of appreciate it from a frontal view. This is the women's court. Here's the southeastern gate, starting with this one. Southeastern gate, Lishkas HaNezirim, that was the Nazarite chamber. Shasham Mevashlin as Shalmeyan Umegalchin as Sa'aram. This is where they would cook the peace offering, which every Nazir would bring, and this is where they would shave their head at the end of their term. So he's getting a haircut here. Of course, it's all imagined. We don't have any accurate depictions, but it's just an imagined version of what it would look like. That's Droimis Mizrachis. Then going back, Mizrachis Tzfainis, the northeastern corner. Northeastern corner is over here. What's in the northeastern corner? Lishkas Dir HaEtzim. It's called the wood chamber. Shasham Kohanim Baalei Mumin Misalim Ba'etzim. Kohanim who had blemishes and couldn't serve in the temple, they would check the wood that was going to be used for the Mizbeach for worms. Any wood on the altar had to be perfect wood. Couldn't have any worms. So they would sit here and check the logs and make sure they didn't have worms. Shakol eitz nimsa b'telas pasal. Any wood that was found to have a worm in it is disqualified. Okay, going back. Tzfainis ma'aravis. Now, the northwestern corner, this one over here. What was in the northwestern corner? Lishkas hamitzoyroim, the tsaras chamber, the leprosy, the leper's chamber. What was in this chamber? The Rambam doesn't say over here, but there was a mikveh in there where they used to purify themselves from the tzaras as part of their purification process. Ma'aravis Draimis, in the final chamber, the southwestern chamber, over here, Baha Yunaisnin Yayin Vashemen, they used to store their wine and oil that was used for the libations, for the karbanot. The Hihaisan Nikras Lishkas Beis Shmanya. It was called the chamber of the house of oils. So you can see, again, also imagine depictions. Wine and oil was stored here, that was used all the time in the service of the temple. Halacha tes Ezras Hanashim Haisamu Kefes Gzustira. The Ezras Nashim was surrounded by a balcony. This is the balcony, the blue here. This was basically on top, lining the top of the chambers, all over here, was one big balcony. So that women can look from on top, and the men on bottom, so they shouldn't be mixed. This is referring specifically to what's called Simchas Beis HaShe'eva. On Sukkot, there was a massive rejoicing that would take place in the temple. All the men would be on the bottom, all the women would be on the top. This was the first mechitza. As many shuls have today, a women's gallery, we do, upstairs, to provide for Jewish modesty. Whenever we serve in a temple, and today also whenever we daven, we divide the genders so that we can focus and properly turn our attention to Hashem. This was true also in the Holy Temple, and for this reason, it was called the women's court, because it was the court where women had a special place to see their proceedings. Halacha Yod Ubayis Gadol Haya Bitzad HaAzara Bitzfayna Mibachutz. There was a big chamber on the side of the inner temple courtyard, on the north side, kind of pushed to the outside. Let's see if we can see it in the bird's eye view. This map doesn't exactly represent the Rambam's opinion, but it would be this chamber here. This chamber. So it's on the north side, right? Because this is the north side of the temple. And you can't really see it exactly, but it was kind of pushed outwards. It was half in, half out of the holy area. Bein ha'azara v'hachel. Between the temple courtyard and the space right outside the temple courtyard. It was basically built into the wall of the Azara. V'hayabanui kipa. It was built with a dome on top as a roof. Umukaf reivdin shel even. Surrounded by rows of stone. Again, we don't have an accurate depiction, but this is the imagined concept. There would be these like protrusions of stones in the wall where the Kohanim would sleep. It was called the house of the bonfire. There was a big fire here. Why? Because the Talmud explains, because the Kohanim walked barefoot in the temple. It was very cold, stone floor. And they would come here to heat up. Sit there and there would be a fire and you could heat up. Now, this room, it had two openings. Echad pasuach la'azara, ve'echad pasuach la'chel. One opened directly into the temple courtyard on this side, and the other side opened into the space outside the temple courtyard. It was the non-holy spot. In this chamber, there was 4 mini chambers. Shtayim kodesh u'shtayim chol. 2 in the holy area, 2 in the unholy area. I'll go back to this picture again so you can see. I don't know if you can see so clearly, but see these 2 little boxes? Those were the 2 holy chambers, and these 2 boxes up here were the 2 non-holy chambers. What was the job of those chambers? Well, one second. In this room, there were markers. See these markers over here? That would divide. Once you cross those markers, you're in the holy area. If you went the other way, you were in the non-holy area. So I kind of made a mistake. This is the holy area. This is the entrance to the chel, the outside, because they would sleep in the non-holy area. This is the marker. Anywhere past the non-holy, you can sleep. Anywhere here is holy area. So that was it. 4 chambers with markers in the middle. What did they serve? What purpose did these 4 chambers serve? Ma'arav the southwestern chamber, Lishkas Hatloim. That was the sheep's chamber. Every sheep that was going to be brought as a sacrifice was inspected there for blemishes. Sheep's chamber. Udreimis Mizrachi is the southeastern chamber, Lishkas Oisei Lechem Aponim. That was a special chamber where the Kohanim would make the showbread that would go on the shulchan on the table. Mizrachis Tzvayni is the northeastern chamber, Ba Gonzu Beis Chashmonai Avnei Mizbeach Sheshiktzum Malchei Yava. That's where the members of the Chashmonai family buried or hid away the stones of the Mizbeach, which were desecrated by the Greek kings. By the Hanukkah story, when they destroyed the Mizbeach, the stones were still holy, so they kept them in this chamber. Tzvaynis Na'aravi is the northwestern chamber, Ba Yerden LeBeis HaTfilah. There was a special staircase that would take you down to the underground mikveh in the Holy Temple. If you went down to the temple, to the mikveh from this chamber, he would go down the spiral staircase, which would take you under the entire Beis HaMikdash. You'd walk down a hall with candles lit on both sides till you reached the home or the room where the mikveh was. There was a bonfire there, along with the chair of honor. It's a bathroom, a toilet. Why was it called the chair of honor? This was the reason why it had honor. If you found it closed, you knew there was a person there. Today we have locks on the bathrooms. They didn't have locks. If the door was closed, you honored it. You knew somebody's in there doing his needs. That covers the Beis HaMoiket, this room. Now that Rambam goes back to discussing the entirety of the Azara. We said before that the length of the temple courtyard was 187 amas from east to west. This is the calculation. The Rambam walks us from the west side here to the east. From the western wall of the Azara to the western wall of the Heichal, the temple structure, was 100 amas. Was 11 amas, excuse me. The entirety of the temple building itself was 100 amas, as we learned yesterday. From the ulam, the antechamber here, till the mizbeach over here, shtayim ve'esrim was 22 amas. So now we have 133. Hamizbeach, shtayim u'shleishim. The mizbeach itself was 32 amas, as we saw in chapter 2. 133 plus 32 is 165. Makrim drisas raglei koyanim. V'hu nikra ezras koyanim. The area in front here where the kohanim were allowed to walk, it was called the Kohen's courtyard. This whole strip over here, from the mizbeach till this line over here. Achas esrei ama was 11 amas. That's now 176. Makrim drisas ragli Yisrael, v'hu nikra ezras Yisrael, achas esrei ama, the place where regular Israelite Jews could walk. This strip over here, called the Israeli courtyard, the Israelites' courtyard, was 11 amas for a total of 187. Halacha Yud Gimel, v'reicha v'azara min hatzafon l'darei meyo shleshim v'chamish. From north to south, we said it was 135. This is the calculation. From the northern wall, that's over here, until the butchering area. Butchering area, we'll soon see what they did over there. Till over here was 8 amas. The area of the butchering area was 12.5 amas long. This is where they would hang and skin sacrificial animals. Yudalit, Makim HaShulchanos, Shmeina Amas. The place of the tables. There were some tables over here. 8 amas. Ubay Shulchanis Shel Shayish, Shemanichin Aleim Manasachim, Umadichin Asabasar Levashloi. That's where they would place the cuts of meat from the sacrifices. They would wash them to get them ready for cooking for the Kohanim to eat. Ushmeina Shulchanos Hayu, there was 8 tables, as you can see over here. Ubitzad Mekim HaShulchanos, and then right near the tables was Mekim HaTabois, the place of the rings. Arba ve'esrim amas, 24 amas was the space of the rings. V'sham shechatin esakadashim. This is where sacrifices were slaughtered. In order to slaughter an animal, today they have it with machinery. But if you want to slaughter a cow, you got to take control of it, turn it over on its back, and you slaughter it. They would use these rings to insert the neck of the animal inside the rings, and then it was kind of fastened down, and they would slaughter it. The Kohanim were divided into 24 groups, 24 families. Every family had a special ring. So they would use this ring for slaughtering. Halacha Tezvav, Uvein Mekrema Tabois V'Hamizbeach, Shmeina Amos. Here it looks a little crowded, but between the rings and the Mizbeach, there was 8 amas of space. V'Hamizbeach Shtayim U'Shleishim, the Mizbeach again, the square, was 32. V'Hakevesh Shleishim, the ramp was 30 amas. Ubein HaKevesh L'Kaisel Dreimi, Shtei Mesrei Amas U'Mechza, Ama U'Mechza. From the ramp edge to the southern wall was 12.5 amas. Now that Rambam zooms in on one area of the Azara, relevant to some laws. From the northern wall of the Azara till the wall of the Mizbeach, this area, which is 60.5 amas wide. Corresponding from the wall of the Ulam here to the eastern wall of the Azara, which is 67 amas long. So this square over here, 60 this way, 67 this way. Kol hameruba hazeh, says the Rambam, hu hanikra tzafon. This entire square is called the north. Hu hamakim sheshechatin by kadshe kadashim. That's the area where we slaughter the holiest of sacrifices. Every day before davening, we say Shabbat Chalizel Mekayman. And in it we say that in the north, you can slaughter the holiest sacrifices. What's the north? This area. This area here is called the north. It's the north corner of the Azar. Halacha Yudzayin, Shmeina L'Shachais, Hayu Be'ezras Yisra. In this strip over here, this area where the Israelites were allowed to walk, there were 8 chambers, just in that area. Shalish Batzafin, V'Shalish Badorim. 6 of them were 3 on the north and 3 on the south. 3 here and 3 here. Shebadorim. The Rambam begins with the south. See, I'll zoom in over here. These 3. Shebadorim were like this: Lishkas HaMelach, Lishkas HaParva, Lishkas HaMedichin. The chamber of the salt, the chamber of Parva. Parva was the name of a magician, a Gentile magician who tried to dig a tunnel. I think Hamas was the first one to make tunnels. He made a tunnel into the temple to observe the service. They killed him. But they called it Lishkas HaParva on his name. Lishkas HaMedichin, the chamber of the washers. What did each one serve? Lishkas HaMelach, the chamber of the salt. Sham Noisnin Melach LeKarban. They would salt sacrifices there. Lishkas HaParva, Sham Milchin Eres HaKadashim. The Parva chamber, they would salt the hides of sacrifices to process them. The Al-Gaga, and on the roof of this chamber, up here, there was a mikveh, where the Kohen Gadol would go on Yom Kippur, he would dip in the mikveh over here. Lishkas HaMedichin, the chamber of the washers, Sham Hayu Medichin Kirvei HaKadashim, they would wash the intestines of sacrifices there. Umisham Nesiba Oila Legag Beis HaParva, from there was a spiral staircase, as we saw before, the staircase here, that would go to the roof of the Parva chamber where the Kohen Gadol would dip in the mikveh. That's on the south. The Ashalish Shabbat and the 3 on the north, over here on this side, Lishkas HaGazis, Lishkas HaGula, Lishkas HaEitz. The chamber of the cut stone, the chamber of the bowl or the well, the chamber of the wood. What are these 3? Lishkas HaGazis, Shabbat Sanhedrin Gdela Yesheves. The chamber of the cut stone, that's where the Sanhedrin would sit. This purple one over here. It was half in the holy area, half in the non-holy area. It also had 2 doors, one to the holy area, one to the non-holy area. The court would convene, sit in the side that was unholy. Lishkas Hagula, the chamber of the well. There was a pit there, a live well, where they used to fill up with a bowl. It was the water source for all of the temple courtyard's needs. The chamber of the wood was behind them both. It was also known as the chamber of the high priest, where he would spend a week before Yom Kippur preparing there. It was also called the chamber of Parhedrin, which means officer of the king, because he was an officer of the king.
Parhedrin is the officer of the king?
Yeah. The roof of these 3 chambers was all level. Here, can't see where they were exactly, but they're somewhere over here, these 3 chambers. There was 2 other chambers in this area of the Israelite courtyard. One to the right of the eastern gate. It was called the chamber of Pinchas, the dresser. He would dress all the Kohanim in their Kohen garments in this chamber. One to the left, which was the chamber where they used to make the chavitin, the pancakes, for the Kohen Gadol's daily sacrifice. They made them over here. It's not clear where exactly they were, but somewhere over here and somewhere over here. And that's the end of this chapter.